Talk about just how big the stem cell decision is. Here's Carter Sneed. He's Associate Professor of Law at the University of Notre Dame. He is formerly serving as General Counsel of President Bush's Council on Bioethics. Carter, this is the biggest misunderstanding. This procedure was never banned. It just that public money was not going towards it.
Well, even that's a little bit of an understatement. You're absolutely right that embryonic stem cell research was never banned as a matter of federal law. And moreover, President Bush actually did provide, over the course of his tenure, at least $130 million for embryonic stem cell research, albeit limited to embryonic stem cell lines that had been derived before the announcement of his policy.
But as it turns out, what President Bush was saying was, you know, there's going to come a time when embryonic stem cell research, you know, there's other more promising areas, yada, yada, yada. And actually, that turned out to be right. Am I correct on that?
Well, there have been some very exciting developments. President Bush, and for that matter, the President's Council on Bioethics, was sort of prescient in imagining that there might be alternative sources of stem cells that behave in an identical fashion to embryonic stem cells. And we've seen, in fact, just last week, a new development, a refinement of a technique to reprogram adult skin cells to behave exactly in the same way that embryonic stem cells do without requiring the use and destruction of embryos.
Right. What was the thing where the guy who cloned Dolly the sheep, he actually left and said, you know, at cloning, I got to get into this. And it would... Well, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted. What I was going to say was that you're right. Ian Wilmot, who cloned Dolly the sheep, a Scottish researcher, and for that matter, Jamie Thompson, the Wisconsin researcher who was the first person to isolate human embryonic stem cells, have said in print that they find these alternative sources extremely exciting, and because they're ethically non-problematic and extremely exciting and easier to do as a technical matter, they've shifted their research resources in those directions.
Okay, and I mean, this is opening the door now for human cloning, even though Barack Obama says that's not true.
Well, yeah, there's a real fundamental misconception here. In fact, as I was driving over, I heard a news reporter say that Barack Obama ruled out human cloning. In fact, that's not the case. If you listen precisely to what he said that well, as far as the scope of his approval, he says he will support and conduct responsible, scientifically worthy human stem cell research, including human embryonic stem cell research, to the extent permitted by law. Now, obviously, human embryonic cloning is permitted by federal law. Barack Obama co-sponsored a bill to protect human embryonic cloning. What he said was he doesn't support what he refers to as reproductive cloning, which is where you take a cloned human embryo and transfer it to a woman's body to try to start a pregnancy. But he is very much in favor of human cloning to produce embryos for purposes of destroying them in research.
Okay, here's my problem. He doesn't really, again, it's almost like Gitmo. He doesn't have a plan. He announces this, and then he says to the, correct me if I'm wrong, you're shaking your head, so I don't think I am, to the NIH, by the way, you guys come up with the ethical guidelines, and you've got like a month to come up with it. I mean, we don't even have a plan on this.
No, in some ways it does model his announcement that we're closing down Guantanamo Bay, details to follow. He said here, as a broad matter, what's perfectly clear is he said he's not ruling out funding research involving all kinds of human embryos, whether they're donated from fertility clinics or cloned embryos or created by IVF solely for use in research. But then he said, I give the NIH 120 days to work out the details of this policy for informed consent and those kinds of things. And the last time the NIH was given this responsibility back in 1994, back when Harold Varmus, President Obama's key science advisor, was the director of NIH, they made recommendations that all kinds of embryonic research should be funded, including research in which those embryos are produced explicitly and only for purposes of research.
Look, here's the, and people are, I don't really care. People think I'm crazy already. This is what bothers me. When we put science in front of ethics, we start having a bunch of people walking around, especially progressive scientists, walking around in little white coats and talking about, hey, we can make the master race. Why don't we go ahead and use eugenics? That happened in America with progressives and science when they decided that we can make people better, and they took out all of the ethics. I mean, what's to say when we don't attach principles and ethics to things that this just doesn't go off the road?
Well, right. Today's announcement by President Obama was striking. That he seemed to suggest that to object to embryonic stem cell research is to elevate politics over science, and that's
He's paying for it. He's paying for it.
You're right. He's paying for it. He's compelling taxpayers to support it with their tax dollars. But also, the judgment one makes about the moral status of an embryo, whether or not they're to be protected or used as raw materials, is not a scientific judgment. It's a moral judgment. And in America, where we govern ourselves, it's a political judgment. And those kinds of questions are political questions. There's no way that science can tell you what the moral obligations that we owe to embryos are, any more than nuclear physics can tell you the rightness or wrongness of using an atom bomb.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Listen, America, this is why on Friday we're going to talk about, and I urge you to watch the special on Friday. DVR all week and really think about the principles and the values that we've had and lost in this country. And it ain't just a Barack Obama thing. It's both sides. Both sides are taking us to hell in a handbasket. That's Friday. Please, the 9 principles and the 12 values that we can use to reset our lives.